There is something deeply cruel about the world we live in, and it is not always the obvious cruelty. It is not always the loud violence or the visible disaster. The cruelty I am talking about is quieter. It is the kind that slips through the cracks of your daily life, that hides inside conversations, inside relationships, inside the people who smile at you every morning. It is the cruelty of manipulation, the cruelty of psychological warfare, dressed up as love, as friendship, as concern. And if you have ever felt drained without knowing why, if you have ever walked away from someone and felt somehow smaller than when you arrived, then you already know what I am talking about, even if you never had a name for it. Today I want to talk about dark psychology. Not to frighten you, not to turn you into a suspicious, closed-off person who trusts no one, but to arm you. Because the greatest threat to your peace is not a storm you can see coming. It is the one that convinces you it is sunshine. Dark psychology is the study of how people use psychological tactics to influence, manipulate, control, and exploit others. It is rooted in the darker aspects of human nature, the parts that most of us pretend do not exist. Narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy. These are not just clinical labels. They are patterns of behavior that exist on a spectrum, and they exist all around you. In your workplace, in your family, sometimes in your own mirror if you are honest enough to look. The people who study dark psychology are not villains writing a handbook for destruction. They are students of human nature who understand that you cannot protect yourself from something you refuse to acknowledge. The first principle of dark psychology is simple and devastating. The most dangerous person in your life is the one you never suspected. Let me tell you about manipulation, because it does not announce itself. Manipulation never walks through the front door and says, "I am here to diminish you." It comes in the form of a compliment that somehow leaves you feeling insecure. It comes in the form of a joke that was clearly an insult, but when you react, suddenly you are too sensitive, too emotional, too much. This technique has a name. It is called gaslighting, and it is one of the most sophisticated tools in the arsenal of someone who wants to destabilize your sense of reality. Gaslighting works because it attacks the one thing you rely on above all else, your own perception. When someone consistently tells you that what you saw was not real, that what you felt was an overreaction, that what happened was your fault, they are not just lying to you. They are slowly dismantling your ability to trust yourself. And once you no longer trust yourself, you become dependent on them to tell you what is real. That is not a relationship. That is a cage with a friendly face painted on the door. Then there is love bombing. People talk about this less, but it is just as destructive. Love bombing is when someone floods you with affection, attention, admiration, and intensity right at the beginning of a relationship. It feels incredible. It feels like finally, someone sees you completely and chooses you without hesitation. But here is what is actually happening. They are not falling in love with you. They are building a debt. They are creating an emotional credit that they will spend later when the control begins, when the criticism starts, when the version of them that was too good to be true finally disappears and is replaced by something colder and harder. And because they gave you so much at the start, you will spend the rest of the relationship trying to get back to that feeling, never realizing the feeling was a strategy. Now I want to talk about something that rarely gets mentioned in conversations about dark psychology, and that is the manipulation of your time and attention. In a world engineered to harvest your focus, your peace is a commodity. Social media platforms, news cycles, even certain people in your life, they are all designed to keep you reactive, to keep you anxious, to keep you scrolling, arguing, comparing, fearing. A person who is constantly reactive is a person who is easy to control. Because when you are consumed by emotion, when you are angry or afraid or envious, you cannot think clearly, you cannot plan, you cannot lead your own life. You are simply responding to whatever stimulus is placed in front of you. This is deliberate. And recognizing that it is deliberate is the beginning of your liberation. The question then becomes, how do you protect yourself without becoming cold? How do you guard your peace without building walls so high that nothing meaningful can reach you? The answer lies in awareness, not paranoia. Awareness. There is a profound difference between the two. Paranoia is fear that has no home, that attaches itself to everything and trusts nothing. Awareness is something calmer. It is the ability to observe people's behavior over time, rather than taking their words at face value. It is knowing that what someone does in small, unguarded moments tells you far more about who they are than what they say in their best performances. Watch how people treat those who cannot do anything for them. Watch how someone behaves when they do not get what they want. Watch whether their story stays the same or shifts, depending on the audience. These are not acts of suspicion. These are acts of intelligence. And then there is the matter of your own psychology. Because dark psychology does not only live in other people, it lives in the patterns you accepted as normal because they were familiar. Some of us were trained from childhood to ignore our instincts, to accommodate discomfort, to interpret our own boundaries as selfishness. We were taught that being easy to get along with was more important than being honest about what we needed. This is how manipulation finds its entry point. Not through force, but through the conditioning that was already there. Reclaiming your peace means unlearning this. It means understanding that your discomfort is data. Your unease around a person is information. The feeling in your chest when someone makes a request that crosses a line is not an inconvenience to be managed. It is your nervous system doing its job. Start listening to it. Set boundaries not as punishments for other people, but as declarations of who you are. A boundary is not a wall. It is a value made visible. It says, this is where I end and where the world begins, and I am not willing to blur that line to make anyone else comfortable. Learn to be comfortable with disappointing people. This is harder than it sounds, because many of us have spent years measuring our worth by how much we are needed, how agreeable we are, how little trouble we cause. But a life spent trying not to disturb anyone is a life spent shrinking. And no amount of external peace is worth the internal war of constant self-abandonment. The world will always have its chaos. There will always be people who are careless with your feelings, who are calculating in their affections, who see in you not a person, but a resource. You cannot change that. What you can change is how much access they have to your interior life. Your peace is not a luxury. It is not something you earn after all the difficulty is over. It is something you choose actively every single day in how you respond, in what you tolerate, in who you let close, in how gently or firmly you handle the parts of the world that come at you with teeth. Dark psychology teaches us that the human mind is capable of extraordinary manipulation, but it also teaches us that the human mind is capable of extraordinary resilience. You were not built to be endlessly available, endlessly forgiving, endlessly absorbing. You were built to feel, to discern, to choose. So choose your peace. Protect it like it is the most valuable thing you own. Because it is. Not because the world deserves less of you, but because you deserve more of yourself. Never let the world ruin your peace again.